Hi, everybody. It's Jeff here. I've got another video I want to do that I've seen a number of posts on LinkedIn, but actually not just on LinkedIn, in discussions, in conferences, in all kinds of, even not just conferences, just in linguistics departments and language departments for the past 35 years. And I'm beginning to see more and more posts about language death. Okay. And there are many more posts, I would say, after the COVID started with the lockdown, that it became more intensive. I'll say more intense. And the reason for that, because there was, people had more time to think about things that were happening in the world. I think that's what happened. It's kind of a natural consequence. And what's happened is there's a lot more in diversity and inclusion than there ever was before. A lot more sensitivity to it. And what I want to discuss is really language death catastrophic? I mean, I ask this question. I see posts about this. Oh, it's catastrophic. Languages are dying. We need to keep these languages surviving. And I'm a linguist. I've worked on a lot of minority languages or Aboriginal or whatever. These indigenous languages of certain countries. And for the past 3.5 decades, and I've supported many of them. Okay, and even I came to France to from the United States. I came to France to do studies, and I did not speak English. I mean, only for like teaching it a few hours a week, right? 10 hours a week, whatever. But I spoke French at home, right? And I did not write in English. I published everything in French for several years to prove that I've integrated in the French culture, right? And then I went back to the States, and at home we spoke French because we didn't have kids. But then when we came back to France and we had kids, that changed things. And what had happened is, going back to the States, I had realized how language attrition, okay, which is the beginning of language death, was happening in my own life. I was not writing in English, and I was not using, and I was speaking it but I wasn't writing it. And writing it is what it reinforces a number of things in the way you write, right? And I wanted to publish articles, and my English was crappy. I mean, I'm going to say that, and I had to bring that back up again, which was not that difficult. It just means you got to read a lot and write a lot. And at a certain point in time, I said, I'm not going to try to prove anything anymore because I'm fully integrated French culture. There's no problem. I've done a few degrees and theses, and I know lots of publications. There's no need to prove anything anymore, right? And I'm going to speak the language that I feel is appropriate for the context in which I need to speak it. And so we had kids. I'd speak English to my kids all the time. And French became the language of the home in general, right? But English was the language I spoke to my kids. And at work. Well, kind of work kind of depended, because still speaking French with colleagues, but a lot of international phone calls, which use English, right? Or sometimes French or whatever. And over time, I realized that, and I'm a sociolinguist, okay? So I do not believe that there is a right or wrong to anything that happens. There are consequences of choices of people and individuals, which form groups of people, circles of whatever these groups, and the different types of concentric circles create cultural bubbles, and those cultural bubbles lead to certain types of behavior, language choice behavior, culture behavior, language choice behavior. And what happens is, people will make choices in their personal lives, and in their family lives, and in their community lives, depending on a certain number of criteria that are individual to that specific person. There are a lot of and especially people that are foreigners in a language, right, in a certain country. People that are natives but that live in their own home country, it's different because you grow up in a community and you work in a community or whatever you work. You might change communities, but you will keep using that national language. But if you come from another country, that affects your language choice. And depending on what language you come from, what language you arrive in, and what culture you arrive in, you're going to be encouraged or discouraged to use your mother tongue, native language. And And having gone through this myself and having to kind of, after a number of years, decide that I was not going to allow language attrition to continue happening in my own life for my kids, for my family, for my extended family, and to allow my kids to be able to understand my side of the family. They knew how to understand French for their mother's side of the family, but they would need to understand their grandmother and the grandmother had passed away before, my mom, but my dad, they'd have to understand my mom and my dad and my sisters and brothers and their children, right? So the cousins and the aunts and uncles, they'd have to be able to understand that. So I had to maintain both languages, and it was a choice, an active, proactive choice. And those are two major languages. And I do speak other minority languages, which are, I actually speak them more than the people from those cultures who want to speak their language. They prefer to actually let it not be used for a number of cultural reasons. And this has led to, I'm sometimes the person that speaks it more, or reads and writes it definitely more than the actual native speakers. But people don't even want to speak to me because they're ashamed of their language. They're ashamed of their mother tongue because it's considered to be broken French, right? A Creole language or whatever. And it's been a lot of work to explain this to people that it's not broken French. It's just another language. And so what happens is it's a natural thing. It's a natural thing for language to evolve. It's a natural thing for languages to go through, individuals to go through certain attrition phases, depending if they move to another place. And when communities start doing this, then displaced people groups, then the language is going to potentially disappear. Or, one country takes over another country by war or whatever. Eastern France with Strasbourg and all the Alsace area. Over a number of, decades, to probably a century, the language shifted away from German to French. Now, I'm not saying that people didn't continue to speak it at home, right? But the national language of that region changed. And that's changed to the point where there are, the majority of people speak French. But you can find people that still speak Alsatian, right? Less and less. Look at, Brittany. I'm giving examples just from France, but this happens in every country, right? So you've got in Brittany, Western France, there are a lot of people that focus on trying to support and to promote the Breton language, right? And all these different dialects of it. And I've always seen road signs that are translated into Breton, right? But the problem is that I've never heard anyone speak it. And we were on vacation there a lot for a few years. And I'd search out people down in the coffee shops, the bars, the coffee shops to actually try to listen to it. And I'd ask, well, who speaks it? And they said, oh, the dead people, the older people that are dying off. And they all laughed when I said I wanted to listen to the language. They just laughed. And I tried and tried and tried. And from that, I learned that it is natural. It's a natural thing for a language to evolve. It's a natural thing for language to disappear because the people choose to not use it for some reason in some communities. And when larger and larger communities begin to decide for some reason, usually for their children to get a better life than they had, to speak the language of the country rather than to speak a local patois or dialect, right? And what happens is when the people themselves decide to stop speaking it, they're not going to write it, right? Depends. This can all depend. You could have people writing and reading the language, but reading it but not actually speaking it. This happens too, in certain contexts. But this is, and a lot, it's finding people that say that this, we must promote it, we must bring it back, we might do this, and all the energy, all the resources, all the things to promote the language, but the people themselves do not want to use it because they see it as a negative thing for their own families, because this I'll give an example of seeing, the whole decision recently in Nigeria to no longer use English or force English to be used as an educational language in the country, and to only support, when possible, the native indigenous languages. Well, the problem is it's already on a path for English to be used, and the people see that. I've talked to Nigerians, right, who have come to other countries and have left Nigeria, and they see it as just a natural path. You learn to use another language, whether it be English or French or whatever, as a meal ticket to actually make more money. And they see speaking their native language as something that is hindering their economic sustainability and viability. And this is key. The whole focus of saying, yeah, we must support all these languages and all this effort. Well, yeah, it makes the researchers famous, right? I've been there. Um, but it doesn't always help the people. Okay. And there's been a lot of, some of the actual, religious missions that do translation, Bible translations, they kind of think about this. Is it really worth it doing this language translation into this Bible, into that language, if no one's going to read it? Because the whole tendency and trend right now, the trend is for people to not be using that language anymore. It's to be using the national language, which the translation already exists into maybe several different versions. And so this is, I think this is really important. It's a key thing, and I'm really am not convinced that language death, language attrition, and then leading to language death is catastrophic. It's a natural kind of thing. Just like certain types of animals and other species have passed away, they've disappeared because of natural selection. And what's happened, that they just disappeared because of some kind of reason for the traits that they had did not allow them to survive, over history. And this is it's a hot topic. I don't say that I am right or wrong in this. I'm just saying that I'm observing this as a sociolinguist. I look at what happens and I say, well, this is what I see. And this is what I've lived. And this is what I seem to be able to make some statements about, having watched kind of the overall trending of this in really daily life, not just reading some books and articles about it, but actually watching how it works and living in how it works, right? And this is something that I really think that, all of the people that want to support languages, they need to think about. Because can you as an individual actually affect each of the individuals of that language to get them to collectively decide to keep their their so-called mother tongue, which may have disappeared? Because if it's a certain point where they're not using it anymore, is it a mother tongue anymore? Right? Did they grow up in it? But then when they started going to school, and then their brothers and sisters they speak to in the national language, the official national language of the country, they're not even speaking their mother tongue or father tongue, paternal tongue or maternal tongue with their brothers and sisters and their friends. And at one point, can we call it a mother tongue anymore? That's a good question to ask. And is it bad for people to want to be able to pursue another language for economic, for them to be economically more valuable in certain settings? Is that bad? People have to ask themselves this question, and I don't think it's bad. I believe that it has. I just think that I think that there are. Sorry, the little ding there. I think that it has. There are consequences, but people understand the consequences that they're making choices about language use, and it comes down to language selection and the natural language selection, right? Play and make it play it. It's natural language selection, or is it natural language selection? That's the quiz for you, right? So, but think about this. Think about it. Is it really that bad? Could be, might not be. Thanks for listening.